Tamitakiapi, Leampetu Ashte. I'm Shirley Snavy, and welcome to the ICT Newscast. We start today in Washington, D.C., where tribal leaders gathered for the winter meeting of the National Congress of American Indians. President Mark Macarro noted that the beginning of the Trump administration brought confusion and chaos, but said Indian country was prepared to respond. It's time to stand up, he declared. Here's President Macarro.
As we transition fully into the next administration, here's our action plan. Let us hold our ground. That's number one. Number two, we will not allow tribal nations to lose any ground as we move through the next few years. We look for policy alignments with this administration. We want to work collaboratively and continue educating them on the status of tribal nations and the need for prior consultation. So that's like 3, 4, and 5. We will foster and cultivate partners and allies within the White House and the administration. We will work with our congressional allies to avert further detrimental administrative action. We will continue our litigation analysis and preparation with NARF, the Native American Rights Fund, and we will not yield as we navigate the next 3 3/4 years. We stand firm, we hold our ground.
I had a chance to visit with President Macarro and ask him about his State of the Indian Nations address. We'll have that conversation later in the show. We are staying in Washington, where tribal college leaders also sounded the alarm over a series of executive orders that could cut off crucial funding, putting faculty, courses, and even entire schools at risk. ICT's Jordan Bennett-Begay has more.
Anger, resilience, and ready-to-fight energy radiated last week in Washington, D.C. at the National Tribal College Week Summit after President Trump issued executive orders that could pause federal funds and shuttered a White House initiative aimed at giving tribal colleges access to the Education Secretary and direct impact on policy.
While we're settling and figuring out what the executive orders mean across the agencies, the real-life impact for our TCUs is going to be felt immediately. Larger state institutions, they have alumni that they can draw from. They have endowments that they can draw from. Our TCUs don't have 6 months of funding. So a pause in funding that lasts 6 months means that we're losing faculty. A pause in funding for 6 months means that we're closing courses.
At the same time, the leaders pointed out that the president's across-the-board moves to end diversity initiatives were misguided in Indian country.
We're not an diversity equity initiative, but rather we're political entities. We're tribal sovereigns, and I think that has to be recognized in regard to interactions with us.
We're concerned about and really want to make sure that the incoming administration understands the importance of tribal colleges as nation builders and how we're connected to our tribes and the sovereignty that we really have.
And the leaders looked ahead to possible challenges to the president's moves.
And really trying to determine whether or not the authority is there for the executive office of our government. Does that executive office of the White House have the authority in order to do that work? Or is it really a congressional decision that needs to be made in regard to making changes that the executive office wants?
But it was clear the stakes are high.
Some of our TCUs have noticed that, or have noted that if it goes past 6 months, they might have to consider closing.
And the fight will be joined even in the absence of the now ended White House initiative for tribal colleges and universities.
It was short-sighted, and I think it was the wrong decision to rescind that. But we're still here, we're still meeting, we're still talking, we're still trying to get this work done on behalf of Indian country.
For ICT from Washington, D.C., I'm Jordan Bennett-Begay.
If you've ever been to the Denver airport, chances are you've walked on art created by Jaune Smith. She died January 24th at age 85. She had pancreatic cancer. Native American Public Telecommunications, now Vision Maker Media, produced a documentary about her work in 1982. Here's a clip from that.
I think that as far back as I can remember, my art has always been important to me, and for a good share of my life, it wasn't made for other people. It was made for myself, and the fact that I can make it for other people now and other people can enjoy it, I think is probably one of the nicest things that could ever happen to me. But it's always been an obsession. There was a time when I had the obsession, but it did not have vision. And I didn't have the foundation to have vision. And I think that it took the past 20 years of thinking and moving and going to school and pulling things together to create the vision. And being able to bring out the few things from my childhood that really carried me through and put those into my work. And then with this obsession, it gives me a great harmony in my life. It's the major thing in my life that gives me great peace. And it's been something that's been really something that I've had to fight for. And it is my life.
To learn more about her remarkable life, visit ictnews.org.
Ganabachwi minogishiga noongam. Perhaps today will be a good day. Ganabachwi minogishiga noongam. The word ganabudge is talking about maybe or perhaps. We is a future tense. Minnow, talking about something good. And gishiga means day. And then our word noongam is today. Putting it all together, ganabachwi minogishiga noongam. Perhaps today will be a good day.
It might feel like conflict and division are everywhere, but in Maine there's a different story. It's one where collaboration, where people and communities and nations are working together in harmony. Stuart Huntington has more on a powerful partnership putting Native values at the forefront.
Mount Katahdin, the centerpiece of Baxter State Park and the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail, is one of Maine's crown jewels. It's also a sacred place to the Wabanaki people.
And right here at Katahdinuk, where we are now, this area holds a lot of Atko Kagano, we call them, the stories.
And now it is also ground zero for a groundbreaking partnership between Native leaders and conservationists who center Aboriginal knowledge and priorities in land conservation practices and aim resources at them.
When Indigenous people are at the forefront, the leadership, our governance is mobilized, that's actually producing the most profound conservation outcomes around the world.
Ranko sits on the Wabanaki Commission on Land and Stewardship that leads the new partnership with First Light, a conservation consortium that supports Native stewardship of land and resources.
Feels like it can be a really good example and set a great precedent for future land return projects to come, whether it's in Maine or across the nation.
The project's centerpiece is the purchase for $32 million and planned return to the Penobscot Nation of 31,000 acres near Katahdin. And it's not just any land, it's sacred land.
Land beneath us, we relate to it. Gigawusin, or Gigawusinana, as our mother.
It's a very big and very special place for the Penobscot.
It's a large amount of acreage for what are considered land return projects, but it cuts to the heart of what Penobscot Nation, Penobscot culture and community is about.
Land is very important for us to be able to practice traditional life ways and make sure that we're able to harvest sustenance species such as moose, deer, brook trout, other fish.
First Light represents a huge shift for the conservation community. They're able to do our collective work and not take from or want to take credit for it. It is extremely special. I have not seen anything like it nationally.
But nothing hatched overnight. In First Light's early days, in 2017, it ran into trust issues. Shannon Hill represents the Mi'kmaq Nation on the Wabanaki Commission.
We come from a place where we can't trust because things were taken away from us.
First Light in December helped Hills Nation reacquire 103 acres. At first, she was skeptical.
it was very hard for me 2 years ago when I started to grasp that this group sole purpose is to raise money and buy land and give it back to us. So I was like, well, what are the strings? It's like, there's got to be something else. What's the bottom line here? You just don't give away stuff like that, and especially to us. Nobody ever gives us stuff anymore. And it's usually the opposite way. And
But the two sides have grown together into a sturdy alliance.
First Light has been incredible. They bridged the conservation and the private funders with the Wabanaki people in a way so that we could both slowly trust each other.
And maybe pave the way for others.
I absolutely think this can spread.
This is going to be a game changer in our history.
A big part of what we see with First Light work is that it can expand, not as a recipe for how this can be done elsewhere, but for an example that shows there are ways wherever you are where the conservation community, the indigenous communities that are there can share common interests and common goals and work together to something that is really creating prosperity and a better future for all the community.
The amazing things that we're doing here, I think, can be an example and can be a template for this kind of work throughout the country, throughout North America, and maybe even worldwide.
For ICT from Wabanaki Homelands, I'm Stuart Huntington.
Mark Macarro is the president of the National Congress of American Indians. He delivered the State of Indian Nations address on Monday, February 10th in Washington, D.C. It's the oldest and largest American Indian and Alaska Native organization. It serves the broad interest of tribal governments and communities. Welcome, President Macarro.
Thank you for having me. Welcome.
I want to point out that while you are president of NCAI, you also serve as chairman of the Pechanga Band of Indians in Southern California, and you've had this job for nearly 30 years.
It's actually been 30 years. I became chairman in 1995.
Okay, well, congratulations. But that means you've been around the block a few times. And
a couple times.
You've seen many new leaders in the Oval Office, and it's been a flurry of activities these 3 weeks that Trump has been around. But the Biden administration, he employed more Native Americans in many branches of government than anybody else. And in fact, Deb Haaland was the first Native American to lead the Department of the Interior. And what will it take to keep up that momentum in Indian country?
One of the things about elections is there are consequences. And every president gets to set their own priorities. And the previous administration, the Biden administration, it was indeed a priority not only to bring in a Native woman into the Interior Department to run the Interior Department as a cabinet secretary. And I think there were over 160 appointed positions throughout the federal government for Native Americans. It was very consequential that way. And it remains to be seen whether this administration will have the hiring and placing into consequential positions Native Americans. So we'll see. There have been other priorities, it appears, at this point.
Apparently. I had asked O.J. Simmons to be on this call. He runs the Coalition of Large Tribes, and he talked about the need to educate the new administration's officials. But let's go ahead and hear this soundbite from what he had to say.
First of all, tribes do this every 4 years, even every 2 years during midterms. One of the things that we look at is educating the people. A lot of them are not aware of the treaty obligations. A lot of them are not aware of the nation-to-nation obligations. And so rather than us getting upset and calling people names and whatnot, what we want to do is reach out to them, educate them so they understand the treaty obligations, educate them so that they know they're dealing with as a nation-to-nation.
Mr. Simmons represents many of the large land-based tribes, but NCAI is a voice for all tribes. How do you approach that work?
The primary currency of NCAI is the resolutions. And so a resolution for NCAI is the position and it's the voice, the collective voice of the National Congress embodied in a resolution. Whatever we can get a resolution on is that represents that unified position.
You spoke for 39 minutes on Monday. I don't know if you kept track, but I did.
I didn't. So thank you.
And you focused on education, healthcare, economic development, and environmental protection. And in light of Trump's quest to shrink the federal government, what do you see as Indian country's biggest challenges?
Well, the initial challenge right now is to make sure that the Trump administration, in spite of the executive orders, understands that that Indian country and programs for Indian country are not minority programs. They're not race-based programs. They are the business end of the treaty and trust responsibility that the United States has to tribes. And so, whether it is an environmental program or an education program, maybe a language restoration program, maybe it's law enforcement funding, healthcare dollars through IHS, everything the United States government does in terms of funding is because of this trust and treaty responsibility that it has to tribes. So, so that we have an education challenge, we have an information challenge. There's been a lot happening very quickly, in a way that's atypical, I think, of presidential administrations. Looming, I think, on the short-term horizon is, the federal employees who were asked to consider early retirement, to take the buyout. There could be a potential shortage. The worst case scenario is there may be very few personnel left in the federal government to actually be present to administer the grants, to turn on the funding.
One of the things that I appreciated in your speech was you quoted the Declaration of Independence, and where they called us merciless Indian savages. Now, that's a history lesson right there. And how do we keep that true history in the classroom and in Congress?
It's become an issue that some folks in some quarters don't want to have a more accurate version of America's history taught. And so, our position is, let's teach all of the history that's there, warts and all, because what happened in the past colors the present. And I mean, there's no more perfect example of that than with the boarding schools, even also the treaties. I, we talk so much about upholding the treaty rights for two reasons. One is everything that led up to the execution of those treaties and then the signing of those by tribal leaders was part of a contract deal that was being made, that the United States government was making with the Indian nations. And Americans need to know that.
Leonard Peltier is going to be released in a couple of days. What does that mean to you?
He's still imprisoned. It moves the confinement to home. It's home confinement. I wish he was pardoned. I wish the sentence would have been commuted. And, maybe that's something the Trump administration does. I don't know. But Leonard is he's this icon for Native rights, for civil rights. Nelson Mandela was in prison for 27 years, and he was this international historical figure. Leonard was about to be in his 50th year. It is a big deal, a really big deal.
Thank you very much for taking time, and I appreciate your hard work, and I appreciate you taking time to join us on the ICT Newscast.
Thank you, Shirley. Thank you.
It depends on where you live what a groundhog shadow means to you, but the days are getting longer and our relatives are getting ready for the sugar bush. Our friends at Tukabi have this profile of Three Spirit Lakes Farms from Sawyer, Minnesota. Take a look.
My name's Bruce Savage. I'm a member of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior Chippewa. My company is Spirit Lake Native Farms. We're located at 1032 Spirit Lake Road. That's where the name of our farm comes from.
My name is Tawny Smith-Savage. I'm the co-owner of Spirit Lake Native Farms. I was born and raised in northern Nevada, and I came to raise my family here in northern Minnesota.
The original mission here was to acquire land for our future generations to be able to continue the practice of making maple sugar and wild rice within our homelands today of the Fond du Lac Reservation.
I think our business has come far through the years. One of the things that we like to focus on is really highlighting nutritional aspects of the wild rice and also the parts about maple syrup that is steeped in education about culture. When we go out and talk to community about maple syrup products, we educate them about the nutritional value, the cultural aspects of collecting maple sap, and even talk a little bit about, the work that goes into it so that they understand the value of the syrup and the value of the product is enormous because there's a lot of effort that goes into making just 1 gallon of syrup.
So I've always had an interest in business, and I always wanted to move back to the reservation so that I could be a part of the community and be an asset to my community. We don't have very strong food systems within our tribal communities. So supporting a tribal producer that's actually producing product is your best investment. The farm that we have here, there isn't another one that I know of that's native owned for hundreds of miles. But at least it gives our communities the opportunity to learn about these venues and to be able to produce food within our own communities. Is it easy? Absolutely not. Can everyone afford it? Absolutely not. Land is the biggest barrier. Throughout time, true wealth is land.
I think as a native food producer, you're always having to educate people. Educating people on the cultural significance of the food and also helping people understand the economic contributions that purchasing Indigenous food and produced food can give to the general community and the local community. Takabi has an online store where they're sharing Indigenous foods. I think it's wonderful that we're a part of their plan because I know that what they're about and I know that their values are foremost too about supporting Indigenous foods and supporting Indigenous communities. They're coming from a good place too in the development of their business as Native entrepreneurs. I think another difference is that we try to let people know that we're also representing a group of people who do sugar traditionally in their sugar bush, in their tribal communities. So a home out in Vermont may have a sugar bush that they've got going generationally, but for Indigenous communities, this has been happening for generations since the beginning of time. And that flavor, the process, and the feeling of being in the sugar bush is something that is unique to Indigenous people, and they will forever do because it is within their DNA to do that.
Love is universal, but the way we say it, that's where it gets fun. From coast to coast, Native languages have their own unique way of expressing I love you. So get ready for a little language lesson and maybe even pick up a new way to say those 3 special words.
What can country song without you? I might join the Foreign Legion just to prove that my love for you is strong. Girl, won't you stay a little longer? Won't you dare say so long, girl, or do. Would you be my Valentine?
That's to a child. Ayoninshne she'esa means my wife. Ayoninshne shastin is my husband, or in Native country, the common law wife or husband.
For Valentine's Day, you might want to say something like, I desire you. In that case, you would say, Chat du bitsid chud. Chat du bitsid chud. If you wanted to say, I really desire you, you could say, Tsai chuf deschat. Tsai chuf deschat. I really desire you.
In the Ponca language, for I love you, we say Ktawive.
Hello, this is I Love You in Inupetun. Pikparikpin. And for I like you, like as in a friend, it is Nakwarikpin. Koyanakpaktavra.
Kunukamkin, I love you.
Techihanda is what I was taught, and it's interesting because like things don't translate from Dakota to English like in a just a black and white way. The Dakota language is so much deeper. I had somebody explain to me once that Techihanda means my soul loves you, like I love you so much, like to my soul. And then I heard that and I was like, yes, like that's something that I love you doesn't really encompass, like but when you say that Techihanda, like it's saying like my soul loves you. So it feels it's appreciating, just the depth of the Dakota language.
My Valentine, you know that I'd be yours if only you'd be mine. Would you be my Valentine? I'd be yours if only you'd be mine.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.